In the entire Bible, I have not found a single person God elevated significantly without first taking them through the exact same sequence of events. Not one. Joseph, Moses, David, Ruth, Esther, Paul, every single person God raised to a place of significant influence went through the identical pattern first. Different centuries, different cultures, different callings, but the same sequence every single time. And once you see it, two things happen. First, you will never be able to unsee it because it is woven into every page of Scripture. Second, you will be able to look at your own life and identify exactly where you are in the process. Because here is what nobody tells you. The painful season you are in right now might not be random. It might not be punishment. It might be preparation. And you might be much further along than you think. Before we look at how God moves, I need you to understand one foundational principle. Because without it, everything else I am about to say will just sound like motivational noise. The principle is this: God does not elevate people. He elevates character, the position, the blessing, the breakthrough. Those are just containers. What God is actually doing in every painful season, in every delay, in every test, is building the character that can carry the weight of what He is about to give you. Because here is the hidden danger of giving someone authority or blessing before they are ready to hold it. It crushes them, or worse, it corrupts them. God loves you way too much to do either. He looks at what happens when the inside is not ready for the outside, and He says, "Not with you. I am going to be careful with you because I am serious about using you." It always begins with a whisper of what is to come. He gives you a glimpse of your future long before He gives you access to it. This is almost always how it starts. Not with the elevation itself, but with a preview. Think about Joseph at 17 years old. God gave him a dream. He saw his brothers bowing down to him. The sun, the moon, the stars bowing to him. The dream was real, it was authentic, and it was directly from God. But then, Joseph spent the next 13 years in slavery and in a dungeon. He was as far from that dream as it was humanly possible to get. But the dream did not come after the suffering. It came before it. God showed him the destination before taking him down the brutal road that led there. He showed Abraham the stars before giving him a son. He showed David the anointing oil while he was still smelling like sheep. He shows you the destination first because He knows you are going to need an anchor. When everything gets dark, when your current reality looks like the exact opposite of what God promised, you have something to hold on to. Sometimes it is a literal dream. Sometimes it is a deep, persistent sense of calling that you cannot shake off. Sometimes it is a gift that operates at a level slightly beyond your current position. It is something inside you that keeps pointing to something ahead of you. It is God saying, "Look at this. Remember this, because the journey is about to get hard." And almost immediately after that glimpse, something confusing happens. Instead of moving you toward a crowd, God pulls you into isolation. He draws you away from the noise, away from the familiar, and into a wilderness season. Moses had to leave the luxury of Egypt to spend 40 years on the backside of the desert in Midian. He went from being a prince surrounded by thousands of servants to a shepherd talking to sheep in total silence. David was anointed king, but he didn't go straight to a throne. He went back to the lonely fields. God always creates distance between you and the voices that influence you. He has to get you alone. Because as long as you are surrounded by the opinions of others, as long as you are relying on the validation of your peers, you cannot hear His voice clearly. In the wilderness, the distractions fade, the applause stops, the phone stops ringing, the invitations dry up. If you feel like you have been hidden lately, if you feel like everyone else is passing you by and you are stuck in the shadows, do not panic. You have not been buried. You have been planted. God is isolating you so that your roots can grow deep into Him instead of spreading out into the shallow soil of other people's opinions. While you are in that quiet, hidden place, He begins a process that feels like destruction, but is actually surgery. He starts stripping away everything you were relying on that wasn't Him. This is the part that breaks people. Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful king on earth. He built Babylon and trusted in his own majesty. In a single moment, God stripped his sanity, his kingdom, and his dignity. He lived in the fields like an animal for 7 years until he finally looked up to heaven. The moment he stopped looking at himself and looked up, everything was restored. Now, your version of this is probably less dramatic. You probably haven't lost your mind and gone to eat grass in a field. But the principle is identical. God often works through subtraction before He works through addition. He removes the job that gave you your identity before he gives you your true calling. He removes the relationship you were hiding behind before he shows you what you were actually made for. He dismantles the safety net you built for yourself. He takes away the plan you had, the plan that was going to get you where you wanted to go on your own terms, and replaces it with a silence that forces you to ask, for the very first time, what he actually wants. If there is something in your life right now that God seems to be prying out of your hands, let it go. The thing you are gripping so tightly might be the exact thing God needs you to release before he can hand you what is next. With your hands finally empty, God moves to watch how you handle the things that seem to not matter at all. He tests your faithfulness in the small, invisible moments where absolutely nobody is watching. Jesus said it plainly, "Whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much." This is God's actual operating system for promotion. Look at Joseph in Potiphar's house. He was a slave. He had no rights, no career trajectory, no HR department to complain to. Yet, he was faithful in sweeping floors and managing accounts. And in the darkest, most private moment, when Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him, Joseph ran. There were no cameras. There was no accountability group. He was in a foreign land where no one knew his name. The easiest thing in the world would have been to compromise, but he chose integrity in the dark. And for his integrity, he was thrown straight into a dungeon. Notice that God didn't immediately reward him, but God also didn't leave him. He was building the foundation. David killed a lion and a bear when no one was watching. There was no audience, no applause, no trophies. He was faithful in the unseen, and that is why God trusted him with Goliath in the scene. The ethical decisions you are making right now when nobody is looking, the way you treat people when there is nothing to gain from them, the effort you put into a job that feels way beneath your potential, these are not irrelevant to your calling. They are the interview. Your public blessing will only stand if it is built on the foundation of your private integrity. But doing the right thing in the dark does not guarantee that people will understand you in the light. In fact, as God continues to prepare you, he allows you to be deeply misunderstood by the people around you. Noah spent decades building an ark in a world that had never seen rain. Imagine the mockery. Imagine the whispers in town. Imagine the sheer humiliation of following a vision that looked completely insane to everyone else. Even Jesus' own brothers did not believe in him at first. They told him to go show himself to the world if he was so great, misunderstanding his timing and his purpose. When God is elevating you, he gives the vision to you, not to your friends, not to your family, not to your coworkers. And because they cannot see what God showed you, they will question your choices. They will tell you that you are dreaming too big, or that you are wasting your life, or that you are taking things too seriously. God allows this misunderstanding to burn away your need for human approval. If you need people to clap for you before you take a step, you will never walk into what God has for you. You have to reach a point where you are perfectly, completely okay with looking foolish to the world, as long as you know you are being obedient to God. And the pain often goes much deeper than just being misunderstood. Before God elevates you, he will almost always allow someone to betray you or forget you right when you needed them most. This produces the most bitterness of any season, because it is not just circumstantial pain, it is pain with a face. People are much harder to forgive than circumstances. Think of Joseph in the prison. He interprets the dream for Pharaoh's cupbearer. He asks for one simple favor. When it goes well for you, remember me. The cupbearer gets his job back, walks right out of the prison into the luxury of the palace, and completely forgets Joseph existed. For 2 full years, the one person who could have helped him simply vanished. But look closely at the sovereignty of God in this pain. If the cupbearer had remembered immediately, Joseph would have left the prison as a slave who was good at interpreting dreams. He would have been a novelty in the court. Instead, because of the delay, because of the forgetting that felt like cruel abandonment, Joseph left that prison as the prime minister of Egypt. God used a person's failure to position Joseph for an outcome he could not have manufactured himself. Think about the betrayal in your own story. The person who walked away, the mentor who let you down, the friend who disappeared when your life got hard. I am not saying their behavior was acceptable, but God is sovereign enough to use their failure to force you into total dependence on him. More importantly, he uses it to test your heart. Unforgiveness is a prison that only you are locked inside. God cannot elevate someone whose hands are still gripping an old wound. Joseph could only rule Egypt because he could look at the brothers who sold him and say, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." You have to forgive them, not because they deserve it, but because your future requires it. Then comes the silence. The waiting stretches out longer than you ever thought possible. You have survived the stripping. You have been faithful in the dark. You have forgiven the betrayal, and yet, nothing changes. The door remains firmly shut. This is the test of the delay. Abraham was promised a son, but he had to wait 25 years for Isaac to be born. 25 years of watching his body grow old, watching his wife grow old, and watching the promise look more impossible with every passing sunrise. Why does God make us wait? Because the waiting is not a gap between where you are and where you are going. The waiting is the classroom. In the delay, God is stretching your capacity. If He gave you the promise instantly, you would trust the promise. By making you wait, He teaches you to trust the promiser. Delay burns away our impatience. It destroys our entitlement. It forces us to come to the end of our own strength. When you are waiting, it feels like nothing is happening, but underneath the surface, everything is shifting. God is aligning circumstances, moving people, and shifting atmospheres that you cannot even see. The delay is not a denial. It is God ensuring that when you finally step into the promise, you are strong enough to stay there without collapsing. This agonizing wait eventually leads to the most profound and painful requirement of all, complete and total surrender of the dream itself. God will ask you to lay the very thing He promised you back on the altar. Abraham waited 25 years for Isaac. Isaac was the miracle. Isaac was the fulfillment of everything God said. And then God said, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, and offer him as a sacrifice." It makes no logical sense. Why would God give a promise only to ask for it back? Because God has to make sure that the blessing has not replaced Him in your heart. He has to know that you love the giver more than the gift. Abraham took his son up the mountain. He laid the wood down. He raised the knife. He was fully prepared to let it go because he trusted God that much. And at the last possible second, God stopped him. He said, "Now I know." God did not want Isaac to die. He wanted Abraham's clinging to Isaac to die. Right now, God might be asking you to surrender the outcome you want so badly. He is asking you to pry your fingers off the steering wheel. He wants you to reach the place where you can honestly say, "Lord, if this dream never happens, if I never get the position, if the door never opens, you are still good, and you are still enough." Until you can be okay without the promise, you are not ready to handle the promise. Surrender is the ultimate key that unlocks the final door. But just when you have surrendered everything, just when the waiting seems to be over and the door is finally starting to swing open, something terrifying happens. God allows one final test, and it almost always looks exactly like total defeat. This is the exact moment where most people give up and walk away, right before the breakthrough. Think of Moses at the Red Sea. The Israelites are finally free. They have left Egypt. The promise is happening. And then, Pharaoh changes his mind. The Egyptian army is closing in from behind. The impassable Red Sea is in front of them. There is nowhere to run. From every human angle, it is completely over. It looks like the whole journey was a mistake. It looks like going back to slavery was the only logical option. And in that terrifying moment, God tells Moses to raise his staff, and the sea splits. Think of Elijah at Mount Carmel. He calls down fire from heaven, defeating 450 false prophets. It is the greatest victory of his life. But the very next day, Queen Jezebel sends a death threat, and Elijah is running for his life, sitting under a tree, begging God to let him die. The final test presents itself as undeniable evidence that you heard God wrong, that you are a failure, that it is entirely over. A door slams shut. A plan falls through at the last minute. The funding disappears. The question God is asking in this terrifying moment is the same question He has been asking all along. Do you trust me? Not when the sea is open, but right now, when the army is behind you and the water is in front of you. Do you trust that I know what I am doing? This is the step where your faith becomes fiercely real. It costs you everything to keep standing, when everything around you screams that it is over. But it is always the last test before the sea parts. Look at the magnitude of what God is doing in you. He gives you a glimpse to anchor your soul. He isolates you to tune your ears to His voice. He strips away your self-reliance so you can only lean on Him. He tests your private faithfulness to build unshakable integrity. He allows you to be misunderstood, to detach you from the applause of men. He permits betrayal to teach you the absolute freedom of forgiveness. He delays the promise to stretch your spiritual capacity. He requires total surrender to ensure He is still on the throne of your heart. and he allows a final illusion of defeat to prove that your faith is real. Every single one of these painful, confusing, stretching experiences is doing the exact same thing. It is building a character that depends entirely on God and not on itself. The Joseph who stepped into the palace to rule Egypt was not the same 17-year-old boy who arrogantly bragged about his dreams to his brothers. He was a man who had been broken, humbled, and rebuilt by God in the darkness. He had forgiven the unforgivable. He trusted the God he couldn't see more than the prison walls he could. That version of Joseph could be trusted with the weight of a nation. The younger version would have destroyed it. And the exact same thing is true for you. The version of you who arrives at what God has prepared will not be the same version of you who started the journey. You are being reconstructed. The fact that the process is brutally hard right now does not mean God has abandoned you. It means He has chosen you. It means He is taking you seriously. The people God used most significantly were not the ones who had easy paths. They were the ones who refused to quit when the path stopped making sense. Do not ask God to rush the process. Do not ask Him to skip a step. Ask Him what He is building in you right now. Stay faithful in the dark. Keep your heart free from bitterness. Leave the outcome entirely in His hands. The door that God has appointed for you will open at the exact right time, and when it does, you will finally be built to walk through it. Let Him finish what He started.